I'm saving £300 by building my own MIDI pedal, so if you're interested in this, come follow along my DIY journey and maybe you can save some money too. Why am I doing this? Well, I recently got an HX Stomp pedal and it's great, I love it, but it only comes with 3 footswitches, so I was looking for some ways to extend its functionality. And when researching options online, something like the Morningstar MC6 is very expensive, so I went on a journey to find if there's any open source or DIY solution. And after sifting through both software and hardware options, I stumbled upon a project called Pedalino, which seemed to have an impressive range of features, including a lot of the features of the Morningstar controller. It supports legacy MIDI, MIDI over USB, MIDI over Bluetooth. You can assign different MIDI messages to different foot switches. You can also use an expression pedal with it as well, and a bunch of other cool things, including a web interface for customizing all of this. So there's no need to mess around with writing code for it. And the developer of the project even offers 3D models that you can buy for 3D printing your own pedal enclosure. So that's what I did. So I went over to my friend with a 3D printer, Colin, and this is us modifying the model a bit because I wanted to cover some of the existing ports so I can move them around a bit. And this is a bad reenactment of the model being printed because we forgot to enable the video option when pressing print. And this is the finished model. It currently has no output ports, so I'll have to drill those. But yeah, it's looking really good. In terms of the parts, I've got them all laid out here. It all revolves around this ESP32 based microcontroller with an LCD display. I think it's called the T-Display S3 from Liligo. And this is what we'll flash the Pedalino software onto. Then I want to power this by using 9 volts, so I've got these barrel adapters here. We've got these TRS 1/4 inch jack adapters for the expression pedal, the TRS 3.5mm adapters that I'll use for MIDI. We've got some buck converters to go from 9 volts to 5 volts. We've got these momentary foot switches, I'll show you one here, that we'll use. And then we'll have the LED strip here for the LEDs, and I hope I'm not missing anything, but yeah, these diodes, and these are just for to prevent the USB power leaking into the 9 volt power supply when we have both plugged in. On top of this, you'll also need some resistors, and I think that's about it. I'll do all the wiring in my next video, but until then, check the website in my bio for all the links to everything I've mentioned, and I'll see you in the next one. On the previous episode, I'm saving £300 by building my own MIDI pedal. One man. I went on a journey. One dream. It all revolves around this. One goal. You can save some money too. But how will he keep going when the going gets tough? Find out now. Okay, so let's talk about the wiring. When it comes to this, I've kind of found the documentation online to be a bit lacking, especially when it comes to someone that doesn't have a clue what they're doing like myself. But after going through the entire documentation and a few GitHub issues as well, I think I might have cracked it. So I'll put a table up here with the wiring that I'm going for. Feel free to screenshot it. And I'll also put a diagram of the microcontroller that I'm using that maps to the table, but you'll find this on the schematics on the Pedalino Mini GitHub repo as well. Outfit change. I'm looping in from the future here because I've waited to finish the project before continuing the video to be able to fully explain what's going on. The biggest thing I struggled with is how the wiring maps to the actual software, and the best way to show you this is to have a look at the web page where you configure all this and go through it together. I won't cover flashing the firmware into the microcontroller because the instructions on GitHub are quite good and it's fairly simple to do. So this is the web interface you get after you connect to the pedal, and this is where you would configure all of your inputs. Now, I think the confusion comes from the way these pedals are mapped in the software, and that's because they are meant to represent anything that you could connect to a TRS jack, right? So that could be a few different things. It could be one momentary foot switch, something like this, or two momentary foot switch with something like this, or it could be an expression pedal, or even other options such as an analog pad, a jog wheel, or other things. And this makes sense, right, since it opens up the option to use different things as MIDI controls. The only thing you need to do is wire it in such a way to respect the wiring of a TRS port, which is you need one analog pin and one digital pin. And the way the software deals with that is by assigning specific analog and digital pins to each pedal in the software. So pin A1 and pin D1 correspond to pedal 1, pin A2 and pin D2 correspond to pedal 2, and so on and so forth. Depending on which pedal in the software you want to connect to, you need to use the respective pins in the pinout diagram. After you've wired it up, you can go over here to the controls tab where you define what buttons are available for each pedal. In my case, to make the most efficient use of the pins on the microcontroller, I have wired 2 momentary foot switches to each pedal. You can think of this as if we were connecting one of those 2-button TRS pedals to a TRS port. So then in the controls here, we need to map each button for each pedal, right? So we have button 1, pedal 1, button 2, pedal 1. And these controls are what we'll use later to configure actions such as sending MIDI messages whenever one of these controls is changed, i.e. a foot switch is pushed or an expression pedal is moved. But this is all laid out in more detail in the mapping table. So if you remember, software pedal 1 has pins D1 and A1 assigned, so then the physical foot switch 1 will be connected to pin D1, physical foot switch 2 will be connected to pin A1. And this maps to foot switch 1 will map to control 1 and software button 1, foot switch 2 to control 2 and software button 2, and then the similar pattern applies for the next pedals as well. For the external expression pedal, that also follows the same pattern, so you need an analog and a digital pin, and you still need to define this as a control, and you need to assign a map a button to it, which will be basically the parameter that you control with the expression pedal. Then for the MIDI out jack, you don't need to define this as a pedal. In fact, you actually need to disable pedal 6 for this to work, but you need an analog pin to send that data out, and the LEDs simply just use a data pin. Make sure to consider the resistance column and make sure to add pull-up resistors to all the A pins. This is to avoid any unwanted interference, plus some resistors that you would need for the MIDI out if you are using that. So that's all for now, and I hope it all made sense, but if not, feel free to drop any questions in the comments and I'll be happy to help. In the meantime, please have a look on my website in my bio for all the relevant links, and I'll see you in the next one. On the previous episode, we did already. Hello. In this episode, we'll go through a time-lapse of the wiring to show you how that went. Also, I think I still have parts left to make another one of these, so if you're interested, leave me a comment and we can talk. So I'm starting by mounting these foot switches on the 3D printed enclosure so I can guide the holes for the inputs and outputs. These were all custom for my build, they weren't part of the Pedalino Mini 6 design. For the order of mounting the components, I'm following this exploded view diagram as a guide. Here I'm wiring the LED strip. This needed to go at the very bottom. And then I'm wiring it to the microcontroller shield. This is the first test. Next I'm wiring the buck converter so I can power this via 9 volts. And then I'm testing the output voltage and then checking whether the device can power on. Now I'm starting to wire all the foot switches, starting with the common ground. In between the foot switches I also did a MIDI out port. This proved to be a bit finicky because I was following the diagram wrong and I wired the pins incorrectly from the TRS jack. I also wired the big TRS jack here for the expression pedal input. This was the first test with all the wiring done, and as you can see I'm receiving some random values because of a floating pin. So I had to tear it back down and add some pull-up resistors from the analog input pins to 3.3 volts. And now it works. You'll find a link to the up-to-date wiring table on my website in my bio, and in the next video I will show how I'm actually using this MIDI pedal with my HX Stomp. Until then, I'll leave you with some beautiful shots of the pedal. Thank you for watching. Come with me as I show you how I use my DIY MIDI pedal with my HX Stomp. Stick around because some of the tips will apply to any MIDI pedal. So I'm going to show you 3 main tips that cover most of my use cases. First, how to toggle a pedal on or off. I've got a pedal loaded here and we need to send a message from this MIDI pedal to the HX Stomp. And there are different types of MIDI messages, but the one we need to send is a CC message. So to create a new mapping, I'm going to head over to the web interface where I can manage my MIDI pedal. I'm going to create a new action, assign it to control 1. I'm going to make it so that when I press control 1, I will send the control change or CC message. And there's 2 values I need to configure here. One of them is the CC number. In this case, I'm going to use 88. There are some values that are reserved, which I'll put a link to a website where you can find all of those. But for now, we can pick that. And then I have to choose a value between 0 and 127. If I want to enable the pedal, I can use the value of 127, which is the max value. If I want to disable it, I just need to send 0. So let's send 0 for now. So the pedal should now send the 0 value for CC88 whenever I press this button. And we can see that here, but the helix will not react to it just yet. What we need to do is we need to select the pedal, click these 2 buttons together, click bypass assign, and go all the way to the right here where it says learn. We're going to click that, and then we're going to press the foot switch here, right? You can see now that has learned it, and if I press it again, it has disabled the pedal. But what you'll notice is that if I press it again, it will not re-enable it, right? Because we are always sending the value 0. And how can we fix this? Well, we just need to make the foot switch send one value on first press and a different value on second press. The way you would fix that in this particular software is by using a sequence. So I've already created one here that sends a value of 0 in the first step and then a value of 127 in the second step. Then the only thing remaining to do is to make the foot switch in the actions here, make it send a step-by-step plus instead, and then we've selected the first sequence, and we're going to start on step 0 here. And you can now see that on the first press we're sending a 0, on the second press we're sending a 127. And if we look over here, first press disables it, second press re-enables it. That's how you toggle the pedal using a MIDI foot switch. Okay, second use case. Let's say that instead of just disabling this, you want to switch between 2 different gain settings. So let's say between 2 and 9. Well, the way you can do this is very similar, right? We can create another sequence that again sends 2 different CC values. We just need to map from 0 to 10 to 0 to 127. In this case, 25 and 114 are the values. So I'm just going to go over to the Actions tab again. And on a new control, this time let's say control 2, we're going to assign the same kind of action on press that goes through the steps. This time we're going to select sequence 2. And then step 0, and the rest we can leave the same. Here we go. This is now sending the 2 different values. All we need to do to map it to the HX Stomp is go over here, keep this button pressed for this parameter, go over to the right again, click learn, and then press our foot switch. And now it has learned it, so you can see it now switches between the 2 and 9 values. Okay, tip number 3. I mentioned earlier that there are some reserved values, and what you can use these values for is to change internal things inside the HX Stomp. One of those things could be changing the snapshots. So if you head over to this helixhelp.com website, you'll see the values here, and the one that we're interested in is this particular one for changing the snapshots. So we can see that if we send the CC, if we select the CC69 and we send one of these values, we can change different things. For example, a value of 0 changes to snapshot 1, value of 1 changes to snapshot 2, and so on and so forth. So we're going to use this to change the snapshots using our MIDI pedal. So after mapping it in the software, this footswitch sends CC69 value 0, 69 value 1, 69 value 2, and the cool thing about it is you don't need to do anything inside the HX Stomp, it just works directly. You can see in the top corner, the snapshots are updating. That's because we're using the reserved values that the HX Stomp already knows about. And that's it. These are all the tips for now. I use a combination of these for my setup. I keep this in footswitch mode, so I have 2 footswitches that I can toggle from here. Then I have this button for tap tempo and tuner, and I use the MIDI pedal to switch between the snapshots. And I have 2 more pedals that I can toggle on and off from here, plus this that I use to select different reverb levels. So yeah, I hope this was useful for you. There's obviously more ways you can configure this. For example, I usually stick to one preset, but then use snapshots to change between different gain settings. But you could use MIDI messages to change the preset as well. Or you can configure different kinds of actions on the MIDI footswitches. For example, a double click or a long press, and you can configure them to do different things. The MIDI pedal also has banks, so you can configure 2 MIDI pedals to switch banks up and down. Then you can control even more things on the HX Stomp. If you wanted to. I will link to YouTube videos on my website from the Morningstar controller that go through the different options with stuff you can do. I've been using these as inspiration. If you want to stick around, I'll tell you a bit about some things I've added to this MIDI pedal since my previous videos, but if not, I hope this was useful for you so far, and I'll see you in the next video. So I'm connecting the MIDI pedal to the HX Stomp using these cables that have the DIN 5-pin MIDI on one side, and then a 3.5 TRS jack on the other side. They look a bit junky here because I had to cut them up and rewire them inside because they were for a different MIDI standard. And the new thing I've added is this MIDI in connection to my MIDI pedal, which means that I can now communicate both ways with the HX Stomp. But perhaps the most useful thing I did was this. The Pedalino software is now closed source, but it used to be open source at some point. And because I wanted to add more features to it, I basically grabbed the last open source version that was available online and added my own features with AI. So some of the functionality that you see on my device will not actually be available in the main Pedalino software. However, it's mostly stuff around the display. The rest of the functionality should be there. So on top of this nice colorful display that I've done, the other feature is to do with the MIDI in connection. And what that allows you to do is it allows your MIDI pedal to respond to things coming from your HX Stomp. So for example, if I change the snapshots on here, you will see that they also change on my pedal, so that the state is always in sync. This, to be honest, hasn't added that much to my workflow. This is heading into advanced territory here, but you might know that there's a command center on the HX Stomp, and what this allows you to do is to send different MIDI messages on different things that are happening on the HX Stomp. So for example, you can send some MIDI messages whenever a preset is loaded, so you can have your MIDI pedal do different things, such as sync the state. I don't have a clear use case for this yet, apart from maybe loading a certain MIDI bank whenever a preset on the HX Stomp is loaded, but let me know if you have any good ones. That's it. Thank you. Bye.